I'm Jocelyn Chesson. The Virginia General Assembly debated but killed a House bill that would have forced UVA to admit more in-state students, and in the process would have sharply raised tuition for out-of-state students. The very idea was shocking to non-Virginians who say they're already paying Ivy League prices.
Fourth-year commerce student and Florida native Jennifer Baez says her out-of-state tuition bill approaches $42,000. Any higher, she says, UVA would have been unaffordable.
If coming to UVA meant I needed to take on a lot of loans and increase the financial responsibility, I wouldn't be here, simply.
University student Zakir Tamiz tracked the House bill for the Student Council. He traveled to the General Assembly to ask lawmakers to recognize what out-of-state students represent at UVA.
Out-of-state students are important to UVA, and every UVA student knows that. But a lot of lawmakers in Richmond don't know that. Nobody wants to graduate from a homogenous university. Nobody can be prepared for a global economy if they're just meeting Virginians from the high school when they come to UVA.
House Bill 1410 was sponsored by Northern Virginia Republican delegate Dave Albo and was targeted at UVA and William & Mary. Out of 14 Virginia universities, the bill would have imposed on those two schools that 75% of students enrolled be from in-state. That is a 75-25 in-state, out-of-state split, up from the 67-33 divide now. An additional 300 in-state students would be admitted every year, but losing the same number of out-of-staters would have cost the university more than $9 million. That cost would have been passed on to the remaining non-Virginia students, adding even more to Baez's $40,000 bill. For Baez, who already works 2 jobs, including this one at the help desk in the Commerce School, she says the added cost would make her student loans much harder to pay off.
How would a House bill like this impact people from out of state and their ability to be able to come to a school like UVA?
Yeah, I think going out of state for college is already a difficult process. You're going pretty far from home in some circumstances, and the fact that out-of-state tuition is a lot higher is already a big impediment. So if you're making it more expensive, you're making it harder to get here. So I think it will just lessen how many kids would even want to apply.
We started asking questions about why a bill like this would even be proposed because of the harm it would do to UVA's composition and the cost it would impose on our out-of-state friends.
Delegate Albo declined to speak with us on camera, but he represents the frustrations of all those Northern Virginia lawmakers who say too many qualified, high-achieving students are not being accepted here. Albo represents students like Alexandria native Emmy Friedman, who is stunned to receive rejection letters from UVA and William & Mary despite her 3.8 GPA in high school.
Did you feel penalized by the high out-of-state ratio?
I think so, because I think a lot of students coming from out of state are just as qualified as students coming from in-state, but if the in-state schools are rejecting you, then you have to look more out of state. And that's not really fair, because then you have to pay more money for a school that you could have gone to that has basically the same credentials in your own state, but instead you're basically just being milked for your money.
Friedman is now in her senior year at James Madison University. Zakir Tamiz says the university is being unfairly targeted by Virginia lawmakers. Though the bill was politically motivated, the Student Council still fought this legislation hard.
I think it was kind of a sort of political shot at UVA because a lot of parents and a lot of students, because UVA is so competitive, they get angry or they just kind of imagine UVA doesn't let anybody in, so we need to go after them, make sure they're letting in more students.
Do you think this is problematic, that UVA is such a target?
Yeah, it's problematic for every university in Virginia, especially for UVA and William & Mary, and that was definitely the intent behind the bill. I spoke to some students at Virginia Tech and their student council, and they were also concerned about the bill and said this is bad, and it affects UVA more than it affects us, but if it affects UVA, next thing you know, it's going to be going out to Virginia Tech, and all of us are going to be the targets in Richmond.
But there was a second part to this bill, financial aid. The reason for the tuition hike for our out-of-state friends was to relieve the in-state students from paying more to support financial aid packages. Cuts in financial aid would make UVA more elitist by limiting low-income in-state students. this would have actually prevented Virginia institutions from using in-state tuition revenue to fund in-state financial aid. Advocates of the bill say it would decrease the full-price tuition rate for in-state students. However, advocacy and student groups disagree with this logic.
Jared Calfee, Executive Director of Virginia 21, an advocacy group aimed at getting young people engaged in policymaking, challenges this very explanation.
We were concerned that the result would be you're paying a little less tuition if you're a higher income student, and if you're a lower income student, you just can't afford to go to college anymore. And that to us was not a good solution.
Zakir thinks limiting low-income students is a political jab at UVA's reputation, but one that has serious consequences.
At the same time, the bill would have only reinforced elitism at UVA.
Calfee says the root of the bill is in the issue of college affordability in Virginia and the lack of agreement between the General Assembly and the institutions on a viable solution.
Do you think it'll just kind of be a consistent issue that comes up in the Virginia General Assembly?
Look, we have a college affordability problem in Virginia, and that's not just for low-income students. That's all the way up to the top. And you'll probably see a lot of these same issues come up year after year after year without necessarily anything positive happening.
With the possibility of increased tuition prices, a cap on the number of out-of-staters permitted to the university, and limited financial aid, Baez and Tamiz say many of UVA's best qualities are at stake.
Overall, do you think it would be pretty much just unfair if they passed a bill like this?
Yeah, I mean, not only would it be unfair, I think it would be negative to like UVA's long-term goals. Like UVA wants to be like more inclusive, more diverse, and just create that community. And I think if you're limiting the quota on how many people you're allowing from out of state, you're basically saying like we want less diversity.
You think this would have had a negative impact on just like overall diversity of UVA?
Yes. It's no secret that UVA has its issues with diversity and then it's trying to get better. And sometimes lawmakers in Richmond get in the way. So we kind of told them we need to be in a different place, and please let us get there.
It was out-of-staters like Baez and low-income Virginians that Tamiz and his committee fought to protect by sending emails to Albo, crafting a petition signed by over 1,000 people, and traveling to the General Assembly.
We physically went to Richmond, we met with different lawmakers, telling them about our opinions, and we were planning to testify when they were being heard in committee. And after all that happened, and we got the news attention, the Capitol Daily finally started paying attention, and then he realized maybe this is a bad political idea.
After much pushback from student organizations and advocacy groups such as Virginia 21, Delegate Albo revised his bill to allow for a higher percentage of out-of-state enrollment and required Virginia universities with more than 30% non-Virginians to put the remaining tuition revenue toward in-state students' financial aid.
A history of House bills targeting higher education and enrollment at Virginia universities is a cause for concern for out-of-staters and low-income students at UVA. As the number of applicants in Northern Virginia grows, acceptance rates decline, and state funding for higher education decreases, there will likely be more bills like this one in the future.